Thank you for the introduction, Tammy. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I've followed Rotary and the work that you've done for a while. And actually, Gert-Jan, I believe you connected with one of my colleagues, Pouts, at the end of last year. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you today. My name is Oliver, but you can just call me Ollie. I'm one of the co-founders of Seven Clean Seas. Essentially, I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. Tammy, is it possible if I can have access to share my screen?
You certainly can.
Thank you. So, kind of while I pull up the slides, Seven Clean Seas, essentially, we are a ocean impact organization. We focus on building. Okay, it seems to be working now. Thank you, Tammy.
Can
We
you
focus on building
yeah.
projects that, yeah, can everyone see my screen? So we focus on building projects that clean up, intercept, and prevent plastic pollution at scale. So we really focus on vulnerable communities that suffer heavily from plastic pollution and going in to provide systemic change to those communities and also provide sustainable incomes for a lot of these vulnerable and marginal communities themselves. It all started actually as beach cleanup initiatives in Singapore. And then when COVID hit, were forced to stop doing public events. And at that point, we took a step back and said, well, Singapore is renowned for being one of the cleanest countries in the world. Why do we have so much plastic? And we'd already identified that a lot of the plastic that was washing up was originating from Indonesia and Thailand, Indonesia and Malaysia. So it was going across the Singapore Strait and completely littering the beaches. So when COVID hit, we said, why don't we take a risk and hire furloughed workers in the neighboring Indonesian island of Bintan to go out and collect plastic full time? And we'll work with corporate sponsors to finance that initiative. And that's kind of essentially what we do at the moment. But the reason we exist is purely because plastic pollution, and obviously we all know this with plastic soup, we become very aligned that plastic pollution is a huge problem. So I'm not going to preach to the converted here, but what I will say is that 60% of the world's plastic pollution originates from just 12 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, India, Pakistan, China, Iran, Egypt, parts of Latin America as well. So it's the sad reality is what all these countries have in common is that they are emerging economies where they've got growing population, they've got growing middle class, growing consumption as a result, but they have inadequate funding for waste management. And what makes this even sadder is the fact that there are actually countries around the world, parts of mainland Africa, Nigeria, where you've got nearly 97% of all plastic waste is mismanaged. But it's not considered a hotspot because unfortunately consumption is so low in a lot of these countries. So there's no shortage of investment that's needed for waste management, but there is a shortage of opportunities to invest. So the damage that causes is immense. For those of you that have been privileged enough to kind of visit Singapore and see how beautiful and clean it is, this is a photo taken from one of our projects in Batam, which is literally just 45 minutes away on a ferry. So you can kind of see the juxtaposition, not just in terms of economic and social standings, but also cleanliness and unfortunately living conditions. So we always call it the waste inequality, because if you look at the most impoverished communities, you tend to find that they suffer from waste management issues more than the most prosperous. But the damage that this causes is just not just environmental. And again, I'm preaching to the converted here. But what I would say is the one thing that we quite often overlook is the social economic impact that plastic pollution has on these communities. So a lot of these communities informal. They, as a result, they don't get access to the limited funding for waste management that's available, and you end up finding that plastic aggregates and builds up in these communities. And below this level of plastic, you see there's huge amounts of water pollution that stagnates. And on top of that, a lot of these communities are, they're dependent on healthy ecosystems for sustenance, farming, and fishing. But also, there's a higher than average mortality rates from dengue and malaria, which is a result of container breeding of mosquitoes. And also, local air pollution is a lot higher because, in absence of formal waste management, they end up open burning a lot of this waste. So that's kind of where we come in. Our vision is an ocean without plastic, and our mission is to become the world's largest preventer of ocean plastic pollution. And so far, we've created a huge amount of impact. We have recovered over 6 million kilograms of plastic, or over 6,000 tons. And through the process, we've actually employed, and this is slightly outdated, over 109 waste collectors formally in those communities. That means that they're on 5-day working weeks, they've got social security payments, they've got national identities, national bank accounts, we're giving them bonus salary, we're giving them fair pay, paternity, maternity. And it sounds silly talking about it because it just seems like basic human rights and employment rights. But unfortunately, because these communities are so marginal and largely informal, they've never had access to these rights and privileges. So that's something that we've tried to change through the formal employment that we've provided, as well as projects that we're building infrastructure in the communities, as well as educational programs, and as well as the human benefits, the human health benefits of the work that we do. We estimate year to date that we've improved over 18,000 lives in the communities where we build our projects. But our goal is really to scale that a lot higher and create a significant amount more impact. And the key point is, and I said at the beginning, our mission is to really build projects that clean up, intercept, prevent plastic pollution at scale. And that really means demonstrating that there is a demand for investment into plastic waste management. So typically, how we started this initiative, when we set up our project in Bintan, we had sponsorship from the FIFA World Cup, Marina Bay Sands, and Microsoft to go out and collect plastic on their behalf. And we found ourselves in a situation where we had more corporate sponsors and requirements to collect plastic than we could actually collect through our projects. So that was amazing. We were able to pay communities to actually go and do plastic waste management. And because we had that deficit, we ended up saying, well, we need to scale. We need to build another project. So we moved over to the neighboring island of Batam. The Batam Environment Agency took us to 3 areas: Pulau Setokok, Sungai Bengkong, and Tanjung Uma. And that's really where we've kind of piloted this initiative to both mop up the floor and turn off the tap. So it's environmental collection of waste which is already in the system, interception of waste through river systems, because over 70% of ocean plastics originates from the rivers, and then also prevent the pollution in the first place by providing household waste management to the coastal communities. Again, we found ourselves in a situation where we, were inundated with sponsors, and again, proved that we can actually scale to the next level. So we built a project in Bangkok, which launched at the end of last year, essentially a larger river. We use a piece of proprietary technology that uses the river currents and a barrier system to funnel plastic onto a conveyor belt. And we also, as of last month, have just hired 2 collection teams in central Bangkok and installed 3 smaller river barriers in the estuaries. So again, kind of following that collection, interception, and prevention model. And we have a project in Bali, and if anyone has been to Bali and has had the privilege of having the local beer pit Bintang, they've also been a kind of key project partner for us here. But the key thing that I wanted to mention is that when it comes to waste management in plastics in vulnerable communities, quite often we always think about, okay, technology is going to solve the problems. And, when it comes to waste management, it is really simple. The biggest issue that we're facing is that we have a broken economic model, i.e. the cost to collect waste, clean it, sort it, and recycle it is far higher than the value of the material. You don't see any aluminium around in those communities that are suffering from plastic pollution, and that's because aluminium has a value. Plastics doesn't. Therefore, what we need to do is look at alternative funding sources so that we can provide waste management to these vulnerable communities. But the waste management itself is very simple. And essentially, that's what we do. What happens to the plastic is a very important question. So anything that is high quality PET, we put back into the circular economy. But full transparency, that only makes up 2% of what we collect. That means the remaining 98% of what we collect is extremely low value. So we have to find solutions to upcycle it or downcycle it. And then if we can't do either, we have to send it to end of life treatment. Everything, the rigid plastics, the hard plastics that you can't crush in your hand, we'll recycle into furniture, carabiners, coasters, lanyards, coffee trays, you name it. If we can get a mold or a press, we can actually manufacture it into that product. All the extremely low LDPE, which is like shopping bags, soft plastics, as well as multi-material plastics, will downcycle into bricks and roof tiles. And this is kind of one of the other areas where we're focusing on lives improved. So Unfortunately, in all the communities in Bintan and Batam, Indonesia, where we operate, all of the roofs that you see around this blue roof is made of asbestos. It's still legal in Indonesia. So we thought, can we find a way to deal with, waste plastics that we're collecting, that we're trying to, finding it difficult to recycle, and solutions that we can give back to those communities. So we do the same. We've built washing stations in the local Islamic schools with the bricks, and we've also used our own material to build our own infrastructure for our waste management and materials recovery facilities as well. Everything that we do is all independently audited against second party standards. So we're not marking our own homework. Our kind of remit is we want to do things well and we want to do things right. So that means, from our from our environmental certifications, we're guaranteeing that we've got legal compliance, government engagements, the minimum stakeholder requirement. We've got the correct end of life treatment processes. They all have the correct environmental licenses. Our data and documentation processes is above board. And on the social side, they guarantee that all of the work that we do meets the Ethical Trade Initiative's base code for ethical employment. And then, of course, we have our financial audits. And the reason why I put this here is because I think it covers the environmental, social, and economic side of sustainability, which I think is incredibly important, that we kind of live by the same ambitions and mission. And thankfully, we've been very successful. We've worked with a number of organizations that have supported our endeavor. Really, the benefit to all of these organizations is supporting a good cause that's meaningful, that focuses on the environmental and social impact in really vulnerable communities. And a lot of the organizations, they do it as part of their corporate giving, but also, I suppose, environmental, social governance and corporate accountability and responsibility. And I also just wanted to mention that one thing that I haven't covered here is we also work with these organizations, not just to fund plastic pollution waste management, but also help them reduce plastics. So for The Economist, we've been working with them since 2021. We've helped them reduce their global plastic packaging footprint by 65%. And it's these things that are really important because we need to both drive down demand of plastic consumption and increase investment into plastic waste management. And I just wanted to end on this slide. One of the benefits that we really care about is that when we talk about impact projects and we talk about solving the investments in waste management, data is always the one point that's lacking. And I think that's something that we wanted to do different. So for every single cleanup that we do, we collect around about 60 different data points, and we collect them line by line, and we're able to kind of tell across the whole data set, but also for client-specific sponsorships, how much plastic's collected. And this is my favorite part, but the exact composition of the cleanups that they've sponsored. Now, for our partners and sponsors, it's really valuable information. But what I love the most is that we have a huge data set. As I mentioned, we've got over 6 million kilograms of plastic recovered. That data set on composition of plastics, its movements, is incredibly valuable. So we work with a lot of research institutions, particularly across Singapore and the UK. We provide the data for students, we provide it to researchers. And on top of that, we also work with a lot of satellite mapping or plastic mapping software as well to help train those models. So I think data is really important, and quite often people neglect it. But really, if we want to have the information on where the problem is and how to solve it, we need to be giving this data to those researchers, which are hopefully going to be able to address a lot of the hotspots. And with that, that's 7 Clean Seas. And if there's anything you're interested in learning more about, if there's any ways that you can see that we can get involved with Rotary and help with the mission behind M Plastic Soup, I'd love to be involved.